my friend, Rick Rowlands.
All right, so, wow, every chair in here is used up. This is good, all right. So yeah, my name is Rick Rowlands. I'm from Hubbard, and I am 50 years old this year. And so this is my 50 years in steel preservation lecture, I suppose. So I started out just as a rail fan in Hubbard, watching trains and getting interested in such things. And then a little bit later on, when I had a bicycle, I would actually ride my bike into Briar Hill, down to Struthers, and wander around trespassing in some of the vacant mill buildings, which got me even more interested in local history, local industrial history. So that kind of snowballed from there, and in the early, 1992, when I was 18, we had a little bit of an effort to try to make a last-ditch effort to save the Jeannette blast furnace after a couple of other people have tried before. That did not work out. However, it led to the Tod Engine discovering it. So start out here with the first slide. So you could say that this is the photograph that started this entire thing. A friend of mine by the name of Henry Marsilio, he owned a boiler shop in Youngstown. And he went over to North Star Steel. It was a friend of his worked there, and they got into the plant, and they were walking through what was the blooming mill building. And he was taking pictures in there of all the machinery. And he got to this, and he took a picture of it. And so he showed me, I stopped at his shop one day, and he was showing me the pictures. I'm going through the pictures, and I come across this one here. And like, that looks like a coreless cylinder. That looks like a steam engine. Well, you know, we knew that there were big rolling mill engines that had been used in the plants in Youngstown, but we all thought they were all gone. Well, it just so happened that in the bay in the blooming mill building at North Star Steel had so much machinery and asbestos and PCBs and everything in there, they just basically just walled off that bay, and everything that was in there they left. So he found out that the engine was still there, and through our discussions about the Jeannette furnace, I knew who the plant manager was, and so I contacted him and told him, hey, we found this rolling mill steam engine there in, they called it our bay. In our bay, would you consider donating it? And so they said, well, we actually have just had some capital money that's going to go to clear all of that out, because we're going to turn that bay into a refractories bay for relining our ladles. So I said, give us a few months here. We're going to get a contractor in there to do that. We'll have the contractor not scrap the engine. And so they did that, and then donated the engine to us. All right, but let's step back a little bit and talk about why this engine was there, what was going on at Briar Hill that required the use of this engine. So this here is a map of Briar Hill Steel. This is from 1914 when the plant was originally put together. So here's the Grace blast furnace, the Jeannette furnace was over here, and then the Tod furnace was over here, and then the coke plant here, and then way over here was the Ohio Works across the river. The original construction was 8 open hearth furnaces, eventually became 12, and then over on this end, you had the soaking pits and the blooming mill and a couple of rolling mills, and boiler house sat over in here. In the plant itself, your ingots would come in this end here through the reversing blooming mill. There was a steam engine that drove it. Down through the continuous mill, transfer over, and then through, they call a 6-stand merchant mill here, making sheet bar. And then out to the cooling beds. Basic rolling mill technology here and flow of materials. The interesting thing about Briar Hill was that everything at Briar Hill was run by steam power. Now, it could have had something to do with the fact that William Tod and the Tod family were not only engine builders, but major owners in Briar Hill Steel. So when it came time to have power plants built for the mill, they went to one of the majority stockholders and say, hey, could you guys build us some engines? So this is this was the blowing engine for the Grace blast furnace. It was what they call a horizontal vertical blowing engine. It was only one of these built, and it went to Briar Hill. No one else really wanted one because although they were perfectly balanced as an engine, they ran real well. When you had blowing engines, you either had vertical engines that didn't need that big of a foundation, or you had horizontal engines that didn't need that big of a building. This one needed a big foundation and a big building, so it wasn't very economical. The Tod furnace had a William Tod reciprocating horizontal type blowing engine. This is not it. This is one of, there were 3 of these that were at Camel Works that provided the air blast for the first 3 blast furnaces at Camel Works, but it was identical to this one. And then when you got over to the Blooming Mill, another William Tod company reversing Blooming Mill engine, it was the only one of this type ever built. This is what they call a close coupled type, so the cylinders are close together. And then it drove the 40-inch Blooming Mill, which Tod also built. And then you had your 2, you had a continuous mill, which was here, and then you had part of the merchant mill, which sat right in here. And in the background was the Blooming Mill itself. And it was driven by a pair of cross-compound engines. This one in the background here powered the merchant mill, and then this one here, the continuous mill. And they were absolutely identical to each other. The only difference was this one here, the flywheel went in this direction, and this one, the flywheel went in this direction. That was the only difference between the 2. Here's another better photograph. This is about as good as you can get as original pictures of these engines. So the one that we have is the one that's in the background. So going through time, that was 1914 when the plant was put in operation, when that rolling mill was put in operation. Briar Hill ran up until the end of 1979, and for most of that time, this engine powered the 24-inch merchant mill. In the late 30s, it was converted over to a round mill, making the 2 rounds that were then sent to the Camel Works to be pierced into seamless pipe. It last operated probably the mid part of 1979, just a few months before the entire plant shut down. In probably 1981 or 82, a couple of visitors from the Ohio Historical Society got into the plant and took a bunch of pictures of the steam engines, and that's where this series of photographs come from. So these are the pictures from shortly after the engine was taken out of service, and there's the high pressure side, high pressure cylinder, and the flywheel, the crosshead. Now, those of us who are involved, working with this thing every day, there's the big dent that's up on top, which we'll fix someday. Now let's talk a little bit about the William Tod Company itself. So downtown, where the what is it, Ween Park now, and they have the amphitheater they just built a few years ago. That was the original William Tod Company plant. That entire triangle there from Market Street Bridge on over going west. This is looking from basically standing on the Market Street Bridge over by the courthouse, looking towards the river. This was before United Engineering later on built the major additions. And they were basically a large foundry machine shop, so they could make big bed plates for steam engines, make all the various different parts. I think they were testing the limits of this planer here with that thing on there. But there's quite a few photographs of them making parts, and they did stuff like this all the time. The machines weren't quite as big enough for what they were making, it seems. Tod built hundreds of engines over the years. This is a twin tandem compound reversing engine that went about 4 miles upriver to the Ohio Works, and this was, I believe, the 40-inch mill engine at the Ohio Works. When it was in the erecting shop, now Market Street Bridge is just behind those windows, so you're looking downtown, it's like going that way. What's interesting here, they had a turning gear here, some mechanism that they put in place so they could rotate the engine slowly as they were putting it together. Every engine that they built, all the rolling mills that they built, were completely assembled in their erecting shop, and then match marked, and then disassembled, and then shipped off to the customer. And at least one or two of their employees would go along with the order to make sure that they put the thing together the way that it was intended. So you didn't get an instruction manual, you got 1 or 2 people to, hopefully, they brought the drawings with them and they knew where all this stuff went to. So this is that horizontal vertical blowing engine that we had the builder's photo of a few slides back in the course of erection at the Tod plant. So with that all being said, now we get to the point where of our involvement with this. As I mentioned earlier, that North Star Steel donated the engine to us, and for some unknown reason, they actually let all of us amateurs into the plant to take it apart. And I tell you, we were all amateurs. None of us ever been in steel mills legally before, and these people here, none of them come from industry. They're all stationary gas engine collectors and enthusiasts. We have Arnie Firo and Dave Rodigold and his son DJ. These 3 were from Pennsylvania. Craig Prusher was from New York. Matt Picaro was from New Jersey. I was the only guy from Ohio. We would get together on weekends at the Bob Evans over on Belmont Avenue and have breakfast, and then go down into the plant, and North Star Steel would let us in, and then we'd go back and start working on the engine. And at first we didn't have anything to work with, so we thought, well, we'll start with the small stuff, and as things get more difficult, we will hopefully have more resources. So we did as much as we could, taking stuff apart that we could do by hand. Then a friend of mine bought the old Erie Railroad Briarhill Yard, which was just outside the plant, to put a scrapyard in there. And he had this little Pettibone crane. And he said that he would allow us to use the Pettibone crane on weekends, since it was just outside the main gate. And I said, well, if you want to use it on a weekend, we're done with it on Friday, we won't need it until Monday, so you can go and get it. So Saturday morning, I'd also go and fire this thing up, and at 2 miles an hour, take 45 minutes to drive it all the way down, around, back into the building, over the winter. There was one morning that it was so cold out, we couldn't get the thing to start. I had to build a fire under it to warm it up enough for it to fire up and run. And having never run a crane before, I've never done any of this stuff before. I had no idea what I was doing. Managed not to kill ourselves, and somehow tore a steam engine apart. So I get back in there one day with the crane, I run over something and blow a tire on it. I had to go get the tire fixed. Those tires are as big as I am. But we were able to get a lot of it apart with that crane. And about this time, we aroused the interest of David Tod, the elder David Tod, who since passed away. And he came out and visited us one day, and he gave us a donation that was about half of what it took to hire the cranes to tear the engine apart. And so now we had a little bit of money, and we'd have a crane come out take a few pieces off. So we were able to get the high pressure cylinder taken off. You notice the low pressure cylinder is kind of sitting askew because the crane wasn't quite enough for that piece. We picked it up a little bit, too much, set it down. So we at least had that much done. We could get as much of it torn apart until we had a couple of trains come out the next time to get the rest of it apart. So meanwhile, we're there trying to take the flywheel nuts off, and this is the way we did it with a 48-inch pipe wrench and a piece of pipe and a bunch of hanging off of it. So yeah, this is very high tech. So we this is a picture here of the low pressure side, and of course of tearing it apart. You know, this is the way the whole building looked. There was just rubble all over the place in there. Now outside the building was this. We were not able to save this, but this they call a barometric condenser. This engine is a condensing engine, meaning that the steam coming out, you have a water spray that converted back into water and create a little bit of a vacuum, and it would help with the efficiency of the engine. So this sat outside. We couldn't get to it because between where I'm standing and the building is a track. And in every hour or so, they would shove several gondola cars of scrap metal down that track at full throttle position with an Alco switcher, shoving through here up the grade into the open hearth building, which had been turned into the electric melt shop. So North Star Steel would go, and I'm sure Valorec still does the same thing, and there were 3 or 4 grade crossings over this piece of track. They'd go out there and they'd close the gates over the crossings with padlocks on them at the 2 or 3 type locations. The Alco switcher with the 4 or 5 guns of scrap would get a running start and throttle out all the way, and careening down through here to try to make it up the hill and then into the melt shop. So one day, I'm there, and one of the workers comes in, and he's just come back and starts BSing with me about stuff. And he said, yeah, I come into work one day, and one of the gondola cars got loose and went through the bumper and was halfway down the bay. So some of the fun of working in a steel mill. So fortunately, all we had to do was take the engine out of the blooming mill building, take it to the other end of the plant into Girard, in the plate mill building, which was a big empty structure that they were using for storage. They said we could store the engine there until we found a place to take it. So thank God we didn't have to find property initially and somewhere to take it off site. All we had to do was go from one end of the plant to the other. So we got everything into what used to be the later on it was Youngstown Metal Products, where their plant was in this area here. And we could store all the parts in here, and it actually stayed there for about 9 years until they moved to the final location. Cool. Let's go back one. Y'all remember the green container? That's the same green container. Bought it on eBay for like $750. So meanwhile, I acquire some property over on Hubbard Road, and we get started developing it for the engine. So here we have, let's see, the part of the concrete. There's the flywheel pit. Yes, the property looked like this at one time. And slowly, because I was broke. I mean, I'm like, what, 26, 27 years old, 2004. Oh, how old am I then? 30 years old, or something like that. I can't count anymore either. So we would work on this a little bit, that I'd get some money in and do a little bit more, and get a little bit more concrete in, and move a few things and run out of money, and just, I've learned very well the concept of delayed gratification when it came to this project. And even had my wife, Zara, there helping out for a little bit. We were getting parts ready for for the cranes to come out and move stuff over to the site. And then the big day arrived when, I've been using just about everything, use Grimm's crane service out of East Palestine to do most all the work. So this is one of the first times they came out to move stuff for us. So we're taking the flywheel halves and a few other parts over to the site. And we're getting ready to take the low pressure cylinder, load that up on the truck, and got it over to the property and unloaded. This was the low pressure salt plate swinging into place here. Then we set the first flywheel half down into the foundation. And we got half of it moved, and then I'm out of money again. So after we got this much in, now the next step was to start putting in some more fill so we can get the next part of the concrete slab in place. So I worked at a foundry at the time, so we'd have some of the scrap molds, and then I found pieces of concrete. There's all sorts of stuff that I'd haul in the pickup truck. I'd go to work and I'd go load up some rubble and bring it over and dump it into place. I had no machines or anything at the time. That was the machine right there, a wheelbarrow. There's the other container. That one there was $1,500. I don't think it came from eBay though. So we had a visitor, a couple visitors one day. This is Fred Tod and David Tod. Fred, of course, was one of the major stockholders of Youngstown Sheet Tube and also on the board of directors. And the Tod family has supported this project ever since we started. It was William Tod was their grandfather. And this is what the site looked like at the time. 4 trees and grass and a bunch of parts and an old house trailer that I ended up tearing apart there and getting rid of. When we got the property, there was nothing there except for those 4 trees and high grass. There was no driveway, no nothing. Everything that's there now, we had to put there. And yeah, this is, you can recognize the building, but I mean, everything looks completely different. We've got tracks and boxcars and steam locomotives here now. Looking down the other way. So about this time, Dr. Leary would come out every fall with his introduction to historic preservation class. And we did it for, good Lord, many, many years. And every year, this class would come out, do a site visit, and every year there'd be a little bit more. First time they came out, I think we just had like the previous photograph of the low pressure bed plate in place. And then the next time they come out, there's a little bit more. They actually came out one evening when we were actually unloading parts of the engine. So instead of me talking to them, they were just watching us pick stuff up and set it down with the cranes. And I think the last time was, I don't know, a couple years ago that they came out. And of course we had the building done and the engine all put together by then. So, this is what we had while I was waiting for the final part of this, which was the putting of the crankshaft in place and then assembling the flywheel. So it sat like this for a little while. And then the big day come to put the crankshaft in. It's 105,000 pound crankshaft. We had both of Grimm's big cranes out there for this. And, it was always a nervous day for me. I got hoping that I got everything right, and nothing screwed up, so that everything would work out well. So we got crankshaft in place, picked the bottom half of the flywheel up, got 2 bolts in there, bringing the upper part in to put in next. then finally, we got that together, and with that little 5-ton gantry crane, we put a lot of the other parts on there even before we had a building. But then that was the next part of the project, was we need to put a building up. So this was kind of a concept that I had initially, which was here's the engine, having a mill type building, some sort of electric overhead crane, hopefully a fish belly girder type crane. That's what, every steel mill you go into, you got the overhead crane there, so we had to have something like that. This was not the original plan. The original plan was to have a building that was a little more squat and wider, and then have that 5-ton gantry crane in there. But that was until I found this thing. I happened to be over in Masery one day, and a friend of mine that owned a manufacturing plant over there. And so I walked into this bay and I looked up at that crane and said, wow, that's a really cool crane. And he said to me, why, you want it? Like, yeah. Well, I'm going to scrap it. If you take it out, you can have it. I'm like, okay. So I had already placed the order with Shenango Steel Buildings for that wider, lower building. And then I had to go back to him saying, don't do anything, we got to redesign this thing. So we redesigned it into this for this crane. Now, the center to center of the rails for that crane was 38 feet, 6.5 inches. I remember that because I measured it about a dozen times to make sure that when we built the building, the crane would actually fit on the rails. It did, thank God. So I didn't know it at the time. I just thought this was a pretty cool fish belly girder overhead crane. Well, Morgan Engineering built it, and it was number 613. So I got in touch with Morgan Engineering, talked with one of their engineers. They said, oh yeah, that was ordered in 1892 and delivered in 1893. And it went to Otis Steel Company Lakeside Works up in Cleveland. Any of you have been on I-90 going through Cleveland? They call Dead Man's Curve. So you're coming out of Cleveland, you make that turn, and then you're heading east. Just before you get to Dead Man's Turn, right there at Superior Avenue, that hole right there where it goes through, that was Lakeside Works. This entire plant, even the land it existed on, no longer exists. That's where this crane was at originally. And so doing a little more research, we come to find that not only is it just an 1893 crane, this may be the oldest existing electric overhead crane in the country, since the first ones were only built 5 years before this one. So we really lucked out on this thing. Well, had to take it down. Now, those of you who know me know I don't really care for high places, but I had to go up there and dismantle this thing, and had a couple of friends come out. This fellow here, Dale Desser, he came out, and he worked for a crane company, so he was used to doing such things. So we had AB Crane Service come out, and we took it apart to get it over to our place. Oops, there we go. And there we are taking the trucks down. So the interesting thing about overhead cranes is you take the girder, you take the first girder off, the little one, that's no big deal. You take the second one off, okay, but then the trucks want to fall off the runway unless you chain them up to the building. So we had to do that, chain them up to the building. Then you got to go up there because now there's no crane to walk on. Because when you were up there chaining them on to the building, you got a crane to stand on. And then you go up there to unchain them, there's no crane to stand on. So that was, so I didn't have to do what he did. So we get the trucks down and load it up and bring that stuff over to the site. Meanwhile, I managed to talk Morgan Engineering into providing us with 2 new drive wheels for it, since the old drive wheels were rather worn out. So we got that done from Morgan, and then I assembled it on site here and repainted it and got it ready to go up in position. So this is basically sitting where the hot metal car and the 710 are at right now. So again, back to the theme of being broke. Really didn't have the money to have a crane come out for a few days to help me assemble the building. But I bought this thing for $1,200. And it's an Inslee K12 drag line. And it was out, a Deerfield area, some guy had it out there. He had this big property, and it sat in the middle of the property, in the middle of all his junk, and he would use it for moving stuff around his junkyard. Well, the township wanted him to clean up his junkyard, so he had to get rid of it. The thing was completely worn out. It would only rotate clockwise because there was so much lost motion in the clutches. When you try to go in reverse, you'd use up all the lost motion before the clutch would engage. Got it over. You can see the one track is taken apart because I had to replace the pins in it because those things were worn out. It also didn't have enough of a boom on it to go high enough. So you can see there's a 10-foot boom section in here. That wasn't enough, so we had to build a 20-foot boom extension to go in place here. So we fabricated that at another friend's in his garage. And I figured, well, we might as well paint it and might as well put the sheet and tube logo on there just because we can. So now we get started on the construction of the building, digging the foundations. Now I also didn't, instead of having someone come out with a backhoe or an excavator, I had an old front end loader which I traded for a really worn out white Oliver backhoe. Yeah, you've never heard of a white Oliver backhoe. Yeah, neither have I. Nobody else had either. They only built a few of them. I got the thing, it had a bad engine, so I had to rebuild the engine. Had a 6-cylinder Waukesha diesel. I go over to Canfield, and there's a repair shop over there, and there's a Waukesha official repair shop, whatever. I go in there, and there's some fellow in there, looked like he'd been working in there, knew Mr. Waukesha himself. And so I go, hey, I got this, Waukesha 283 diesel. He goes, oh my God, I haven't heard one of those in 20 years. No, tell me you work on 2 of them a week. I don't want to be the guy that has the rarest of the rare everything, So managed to get that thing put back together and functional enough so that I could get it over to the site and dig all the holes for the foundation. So we get that done, put the forms in for the concrete. There's the Inslee crane with the concrete bucket, and then we go to pour all the foundations and all that. So I don't think I've ever used a contractor on this entire project. We've done everything ourselves, from the excavation to concrete, the metal work, all of it, including repairing the machines to do the work. Necessity. So we get the foundations poured, and they actually come out looking pretty good. All the concrete work. I was quite shocked for a first time that didn't come out too bad. There we are doing the footer for the front wall. So those of you who've been on site, this is the what do you call that? The date stone or whatever? Cornerstone. The cornerstone. Hey, there you go. Too many years with lead paint. I can't remember. So, and this is how I actually did it. Just got some wood and made that up. So now it's time to start actually putting the building up itself. So we're in West Middlesex, outfit by name of Youngstown Steel Buildings. I ordered the building from them. It was like $25,000 or something for all the steel work for the building. So I went over, picked it all up, brought it over. Now it's time to start putting the building together, and time to start using the drag line to do that. So The difference between an actual construction crane and a drag line is, a drag line you put the boom out, and you got the bucket that, you know, you cast it out and then you pull the dirt. It's for digging dirt. It looks like a crane, but it's not actually a crane. The thing is, on those, when you pick the boom up, you got a little dog. So you start picking the boom up, and then you engage the dog, and then you let down, you release on the clutch, and it hits the dog, and it stops. On a real crane, you got a worm and screw, and then it goes up nice and evenly, and it goes down evenly. Well, not this one here. So hopefully you had everything set up and your boom was at the right angle before you even made your pick. Because if you had to try to boom up or boom down with that dog, oh my God. We had to do that once or twice, and it was like, the thing would just shake all over the place, and it was horrible. But we got it done. I'm actually by myself. The first day I'm there working on it. So this first column here, I put up by myself. I'm not waiting for anyone. I didn't have anybody to help me that day. I had the crane, I had the parts. I was like, yeah, I can do this. So I rig it up, pick it up, get it standing up straight, get it over into place, get over about on top of the concrete. I get off the crane, go over there, get it lined up on the bolts and set it down, and get the nuts on there. And then I had to put the second one up, put a couple cross pieces in there so the wind wouldn't knock it over. So I'm doing that. This car pulls into the driveway. This lady was driving, and a guy gets out of the passenger side, walks up to me, and he says, hey, I'm an unemployed iron worker and looking for a job. Do you need any help with this? And I'm thinking to myself, did God send you? Like, yeah. So from that day until we got the building done, he would come out whenever we were working, and we got the building put together, and then he disappeared. So maybe he did come, I don't know. But I mean, the entire project has been this way. It's like, whenever I get to a point where I need something, it happens. Somehow something happens, and I provided with it, then I can move forward. You guys know how this stuff works. It's like a miracle over there every week. We should not be able to do what we do, according to everyone else, all the experts. So we got the 8 columns up. Now it's time to put the roof trusses in. Oh yeah, there we are. I think I had to boom up on this a little bit. And that girder was flailing around, and the guy in the man lift was way out of the way. Get out of the way. So now we have to put the roof trusses up. So the interesting thing is that when I put that extra 10 feet of boom on there, the cable on the hook no longer had enough length to go all the way down to the ground. And so it was like 10, 12 feet off the ground is as far down as the hook would go. And you don't want to boom down on it with this thing. But we had someone loaned to me a big Clark forklift that had 20 foot of lift on the forks. And so, ingenuity, you guys know where this is going. So I'd go and I'd pick up the roof truss and pick it up and get as far up as I could with the forklift. Maneuver the crane in place so that the hook would come down on top of it. And then I'd climb up the mast and rig it up, and then pick it up with the crane and get it in position so we could bolt it in place. This was some real third world engineering going on here. But we got it done. We got all 4 of those in place. And now we started putting all the girts in up there. And so they're finally get all the basic steel work in place. Yeah, there's that forklift. Now the other thing was it was over in Masury. It was actually in the same plant that we got the overhead crane from. And the same guy that gave us the crane allowed me to use the forklift. It's at least, I don't know, 12 feet or so to the top of that thing with it all the way down. I had to drive it there all the way from Masery. So I'm driving Masery Hubbard Road, I come around the bend and wham! Hit a tree. A big branch coming across, which was high enough to clear all the semis, but wasn't high enough to clear this. I go through Hubbard and get over on the Belwick Road. And on Belwick Road, you've got all the houses on this side, and the power lines are on this side, and it droops. All the lines droop down, all the phone lines. And I'm going along, I'm like, oh shoot, I'm getting phone lines. So I had to drive on the left side of the road, almost into the ditch, so I had enough clearance of the wires so I could get down that road and finally get it over to the site. I don't think anyone lost their phone service that day. I don't know. I didn't ask questions. So there we are, putting the roofing panels in place. And now we're doing the opposite of what we did over Masery. We put the trucks back up on there. See, I've got straps in place to hold them from flopping off. And we'll get the crane up there in position. Oh, so this scissor lift I rented, and the thing had, I think it had been through World War II before we got it. The thing had like a Frost King diesel engine out of a refrigeration unit, out of a reefer or something in there running it. It would most of the time go up and down. Yeah. So, let's see, we got that. Oh, well, okay, now that we got that done, because we got other stuff going on too. So, I get a letter in the mail from the Pittsburgh History Landmarks Foundation at one point, basically telling me that there was a bunch of steel industry artifacts available at the old Duquesne Works of U.S. Steel down in the Pittsburgh area. And that when U.S. Steel had shut the plant down and basically demolished everything and they turned it into an industrial park, they left a few pieces of steelmaking equipment behind as yard art. Well, they didn't want that stuff anymore, so they said, anything down there that, any on this list, if you want it, you can have it. There were 3 hot metal cars in this line, including this car here, which was a cling type hot metal car, which was built by Pollock in Youngstown. And it was a design that was actually invented by an engineer at the Ohio Works. And it was a kind of a favorite hot metal car design of mine, and I've always wanted one, and now we had the opportunity to get one. This fella here is named Rick Rowlands, and he's since passed away, but he was my right-hand man for a lot of these adventures for a few years. And over here is the trusty Jeep Liberty, which after my wife had got another car, she gave it to me. Actually, I had stolen it this day from this. We didn't know we were down there rummaging around steel mills with it. So another thing that was there was this big steel ladle, bottom floor ladle. I'm like, whoa, this would be neat to have. So we wanted to get the hot metal car and get the ladle. I didn't want the whole ladle because I couldn't move it 15 feet wide and 15 feet tall. There's no way I could afford to move that. So we decided to basically cut it in half and save half of it, and then we could set it up against something so we just have half the ladle. So the first thing we had to do was get the water out of the car and fishing for all the tires that was in there. So we're with a 50-ton crane fishing for tires on a hot metal car. And then we pick it up and get all the parts on trucks and head it up to Youngstown. And there's the ladle. After we cut half of it off, then I cut it in half again so that we can get it on the truck. And then also at the same time, so I had worked for Elwood Engineered Castings in Hubbard for several years. And they also donated a diesel locomotive that they had at their Hubbard plant to us. And so when we were getting the ladle, I got in touch with with Dave Berenfeld, who was the CEO of Elwood, and asked them if they would mind donating one of the ingot molds from Hubbard to us for this exhibit, because we have the ladle, and I'd like to have an ingot mold there as well. So I sent the email in the morning, and a couple hours later I get a call from the plant manager at Hubbard, and I answer the phone and says, "Is this Rick Rowlands?" "Yes, it is." "My name is so-and-so. Mr. Berenfeld tells me I'm going to give you an ingot mold." It's like, "Oh, really? Great." So I go over there that afternoon and meet up with him, and we walk through the back and go into the scrap area. And so all I wanted was the biggest one there. So I found this 63,000 pound mold that actually was a Lukens mold, and said, "That's the one that we want." So they took it back into plant and sandblasted it, or put it through the shop blast, and it sat there until the day we moved all this stuff, and then Brims had one of their trucks go to Hubbard, pick it up, and bring it over. So this is, we were standing the thing up, and this was about 2 seconds before you felt this mighty boom as that thing stands itself up and shaking the earth. So after we unloaded the ingot mold, we brought the hot metal car in, brought the chassis in, and there was the Elwood switcher, and that's just shortly after we coupled them up for the first time. So now 2014 comes along, and it's the 100th anniversary of the first operation of the Tod Engine, and we wanted to do a cosmetic restoration on it because it looked like crap. When we got it, I had just painted it this color green just so it wouldn't look so horrible, but we wanted to do something a little bit better. So we started taking it apart, and so we could repaint it. And we come up with this two-tone gray scheme, which I think looks pretty good on it, and start putting it back together. And I think we did this I was looking for the pictures the other day. I was putting this together, and from start to finish, it was like under 4 months that we did all this, 2 people. I was there every day. I had pictures every single day I was down there. Obsessive. But after we got the high pressure side down, we took the low pressure side apart, and there was also another fellow that I had met that he was he didn't have a really good job, and I didn't think he had a job at the time. So I told him, well, if you'd come out and help me with this restoration, I'd pay him. So he'd come out every day. He ran a needle scale. He needle scaled this entire thing. And he's one of those people, you give him a job and you can just do it forever. You know, it just keeps going and going and going. And he would just be there all day, just constantly. Hardly take a break. So we did the entire other side, and then we did this side. And he did a lot of needle scaling. And then we had to put the sheet metal on, the lagging. Until finally, in September of 2014, a little bit, just a couple weeks before our open house for the 100th anniversary, we were to this point here. I still not completely done, mostly done, but I wanted to get a picture of what it looked like finished. So this is what we started out with in 1995. This is what it looked like once we got the building done and the engine in place. And this is what it looked like the night of our open house. And that's what it looks like yesterday. And you see all of this stuff underneath. You see the engine not sitting on the ground, it's up in the air. Well, 120 yards of concrete goes in there, and several thousand pounds of rebar, hopefully sometime before the end of the year. I don't know. We'll try. But that's the plan, at least. And have the overhead crane running, because we're going to have to take parts off of this to get it lined up and all that. So that's the big project this year, is getting the engine lined up and leveled, ready to go, forms built, concrete in there, and all that done. That brings me to the next chapter in this saga. So 2014 comes along, September, we have the open house, we got all that work we did on the Tod Engine. And I'm kind of bored working on the steam engine because we spent all that time working on it. I'm sitting there one morning with one of our members, Nick Hovey. We're having breakfast, and we start talking about stuff, and it's like, you know, it'd be nice to restore a small steam locomotive. And I remembered that there was this one up in Middlefield that I had been interested in several years before, and it's like, well, maybe I could acquire that thing. And that's what it looked like when I went up there to look at it. And it's a narrow gauge steel mill engine, came out of the Jones and Laughlin Pittsburgh Works, one of about 7 of them that were built for moving ingot mold trains around in the plant. And I actually thought I could restore this thing. So we paid $7,500 for it, and by December 30th, 2014, we had the thing on a truck heading to Youngstown. So there's a size comparison to the Jeep. So we get it to Youngstown. It had a saddle tank, and the saddle tank didn't come with it. I didn't think that there was a saddle tank for it. Well, I started putting on the internet talking about this engine that we had acquired, and I get an email from a fellow. It's like, hey, my brother, who has recently passed away, used to own that locomotive, and there's parts for it at his farm over in Bulger, PA, which is like halfway between Pittsburgh and Weirton. And if you want that stuff, you can have it before we, sell the property. So I drive down there, back in the woods, behind the house, or behind the mobile home actually. There's the saddle tank, sit out there in the woods. And so we, oops, let's go back to this. So there's a saddle tank there, and there were two extra sets of drivers, and a driver tire off the Bessemer Lake Erie 643, for whatever reason, was also on site. We could have all that stuff. So, let's say about 10 years ago, there was one spring where it rained every day for like 4 months. That was that spring. And it was all mud and muck between the driveway and where this thing was at. And so I was like, okay, well, we're just gonna delay it until it stops raining. April, May, gets into June, and then the guy gets in touch with me and said, hey, if you want that stuff, you better come out and get it because we got the place sold. All right, so I have a rental place bring out a telehandler, drop it off there, and I go out there, and it's still muddy, rainy. Well, we find in amongst all the stuff in the yard, there was this rectangular tarp, and I opened the tarp, and there's like 40 sheets of plywood in there. And this plywood has been under the tarp for so long, the middle of it's starting to rot away. But it makes a great road. So we laid a plywood road back around the trailer, back into the woods, to go back there to get this thing. So go back with the telehandler, grab hold of it. Of course, we had to cut trees down around it. And I couldn't pick it up completely off the ground because it was so heavy. So we're dragging it along. We get to the plywood, there's sheets of plywood shooting out from under the tires, mud and ruts and all that. We get it out to the road and get it loaded on the trailer. Got the driver sets and all that out of there and take off. I hope this guy isn't pissed off that we destroyed his yard. I got it out of there. I never heard anything. They since demolished everything and built a house there, so I don't think anybody cared. But it's just amazing that, like I say, when the need arose, the tank showed up. So we get it over to the site and the engine out over there. Now we got it apart, jacked it up to take the boiler off. The boiler was going back to Middlefield to Jonas Stutzman's boiler shop to get some work done to it, new tubes. So we had to take it off the chassis. And then the saddle tank actually went down to Cary Furnaces where a friend of mine, Adam, there, who was doing some welding repair work to us. And that's actually the boiler shop sign that was out of Duquesne Works. We fixed everything, including broken hearts. So the frame had been hacked away by a previous owner. And so it needed pieces welded on the back and a piece on the front. So Reichert Industries volunteered to weld those pieces on. So we shipped the frame over to Reichert in Niles, and they did that work for us. Meanwhile, at home in the garage, I started work on building the cab. My wife can attest to not being able to park in the garage because we turned it into a locomotive back shop to build the cab. And this fellow here is Chuck Hughes. He's also passed away recently. He was an artist blacksmith in Hubbard, and went over to his shop one day, and he made the new throttle handle for it. So up in Middlefield, Stutzman gets the tubes in, does a hydro test on the boiler, and it's ready to go. And Reichert gets the pieces welded on and get the frame back, and now we're ready to start putting this thing back together. Had a local machine shop also do some work on the pistons. And now it's time to put the wheels under the frame. And yes, this is how we did it. With 50-ton Duff Norton jacks up front, lift the front end, tie piles, and a track jack, actually, yeah, to pick the rear end up. Got it up in the air, roll the tires underneath, and then set it down. And then we come to find out that the center of gravity of this thing is identical to the front axle. Didn't know, I just got it set down and I rolled it back into the building, and I put a wheel chock on the rail to stop it, and instead of it stopping at the wheel chock, the rear end just picked up and went over it and then come back down. Oh, okay. So we start putting some of the running gear back on, and now it's time to add the back platform, which all had to be remade new since all that was cut off and scrapped years ago. And then I had the cab done, brought the cab over, set the tank in place just as a mock-up. Notice there's no boiler in there as a dummy, just to see what it would look like. There's making drawbars. And then finally the boiler shows back up, ready to go back in. So here we are, putting it in place on the chassis. And then comes the night of the first fire up. So I had a few friends over that evening. We put water in it, lit a fire, started getting some boiler pressure, and then realized that I forgot to tighten this one union over here. So we had to kill the fire and dump the pressure out of the boiler so we could go tighten everything back up, then fire up again. So it was actually 2 fire ups the first night. And then came the day, the time that the thing moved under our own power for the first time. So we're still there doing some last minute work on the engine and getting ready to move. And then we started over here, and we have a real tight curve coming back this way here. You can see this green hose. Well, you're supposed to have a saddle tank with the water in it, but I didn't have that. But I had a flat car that had a tote with water in it, and I had this 30-foot, 20-foot length of hose. And so we just kind of wrapped it around back onto the flat car so that we could get water in for it for this first day, for this initial operation. But I'll tell you what, after taking something that looked like it did when we first started, to the point where you pull the throttle back and the thing actually starts to move under its own power. That was a good day. And so then we finally get the saddle tank ready to put on. Had to make special, real short, like 12-inch long forks for this operation. And there they are together, the 58 and the Tod Engine, the 2 things that have drove me insane over the last 30 years. So, story with these 2 fellows here. This is Bert Williams and Ken Williams. They're the owners of Crown Metal Products down in Elizabeth, PA. They are the family that originally saved all 6 of these Porter locomotives from Youngstown Steel and owned them for a while. And then they got dispersed and sold and went to different places. They could not believe until they laid eyes on it that we actually restored one of these things to run. And so they came up that day and actually could see the engine run. And it sat, these 6 engines sat in their field at their farm for many years, and they never thought any of them would ever run again. So the first season that we ran, we only had like 300 feet of track running back and forth with this little passenger car, but I don't know. You make the best of what you have. Down at W.A. Young doing some machine work. And then here's a lot of our crew down there that day. This is a general view of some of the tracking. We got a little bit more track in now. And this is what it looks like now, with the exception it's got a different tender on it. So we've been using it for moving dirt and materials around the property. Oh, okay, yeah. So this is a new extension that we're adding. We can go probably another 250 feet beyond where the end track is right there. So we'll be putting that track in sometime this year, hopefully. So which brings us to this stuff here. These were 2 donations from CSX. They gave us the caboose, which was in Virginia. We got it moved to the site, over to the YNS Railroad that I work for. And then CSX also donated a couple boxcars. After they donated the caboose, we got the caboose moved, and the fellow from CSX sent me an email and said, hey, you need a couple boxcars? We'll give you some boxcars if you want them. Like, I really don't have a need for a boxcar. And so then he sent another email back, are you sure you don't want a couple boxcars? Because, I mean, we'll send them to you if you want them. I'm like, okay. And like 20 minutes later, boom, I get the way bills emailed to me. He's like, he wants to get rid of some boxcars quick. And then after they were already en route to the YNS is when I told the owner of the railroad that 2 boxcars were coming for me. I said, pal, I hope you don't mind. I got a couple boxcars. Oh, that's all right. Oh, we'll find a place to put them, no problem. Okay, phew, thank God. So here they are, getting ready to move them over to our site. And had the Grims come out and loaded the boxcar, loaded the caboose on the trucks. Here we are going Town Square in Hubbard on the way. I'm happy that the caboose was second out here. It's a proper train. Yeah. So we get over to the site and we go to unload it. And after we got all that done, we had the new tender built for it. So instead of that little dinky one, we've got an actual proper size tender. We've got some of our cars with various rolling mill stands and gears and mill rolls and all that on it that we call a steel train, run around it once in a while. And continuing work on the railroad, put the second track in here, so we've got that switch. This is a pretty steep hill. This is about 5 or 6% grade, so it's a pretty good climb coming up the hill. There's Bob working on the passenger car. It's a new passenger car there that we got built for us. So we're going to use the boxcar for it and turn it into an engine house for the steam locomotive. So we put rails in there, cut a hole in the end, put a door in there, and we can keep the locomotive inside of that. So here it is in position. Still got a lot of work to do on it still. So then, not being content to have one Conrail caboose, there was an auction in East Palestine. A fellow was auctioning off some stuff, including a caboose. And this is lot number 58. Our engine is number 58. This was a good omen. So it was an online auction, and I put it a maximum bid of $1,500, and I was watching it, and it ticked itself up to $1,100 and stopped. And I bought a caboose for $1,100. Plus $7,500 in crane costs. Yeah. Some exclusions may apply. So here it is, trying to get it out of his property, and it was really hemmed in there. Had an ATM machine sitting out front of it. I mean, no money in it yet. we got it out of there, and onto a trailer, and then up, and then I had to get the picture of the two cars side by side. And then this is the one we decided to put out front as our front office. So we got it out there in place next to the Pose 58 next to it. Got a little video here. This is. So that's the 6% grade right there. It levels off a little bit, then you got the big hill, which is this hill right here. So right about there, you got to have the throttle all the way out if you want to make it the rest of the way up the hill. And then if you get to the top of the hill, we just coast all the way back down. Brakes on full, and hopefully nobody steps in front of you because it's too steep to come to an immediate stop if you wanted to. And then this last few slides here, this is stuff I took yesterday, just walking around the site, the way things look right now. There's that half a ladle and the ingot mold that we got, and then what the engine looks like right now. So the eventual goal in here, once we get the concrete done under the engine, once we get the crane running and all that, is this is going to be a functional powerhouse, steel mill powerhouse. We are going to run this engine on steam using 2 of those Porter locomotives to provide the steam for it. And the goal is for maybe a couple times a year to have open houses where we run the steam engine. So you can come out and it would be like being in a powerhouse in a steel mill, and not unlike many of the others that were in the valley. And you can see one of these things actually in operation. And I think it'll be the largest operating steam engine in the country when we get it done. Let's see, there's just a view of out back. And there's a couple other quarters up there on the hill. So, all right, that's the last one. So, after all of that rambling, anybody have any questions or comments? Or? Yes?
How's the green tank car coming?
The green tank car?
Yes.
Oh, it's still green.
Okay.